When the factory fire took everything Jae-seop had worked for, he thought returning to his coastal hometown was rock bottom. He was wrong. A mysterious woman offers him work at an isolated seafood processing plant. Good pay, free housing, no questions asked. The job seems perfect. Too perfect. But workers whisper about people who vanished. A locked refrigerator reeks of something that isn't food. The old guard watches shadows instead of faces, and the beautiful factory owner keeps asking about twins. Jae-seop has twin brothers. When a body washes ashore missing its liver, Jae-seop realizes the truth. Some jobs don't let you quit. Some deaths aren't paid in money, and some monsters have been wearing human skin for 1,000 years. The harvest moon is rising. The ceremony is prepared, and deep beneath the factory, something ancient is waking up, hungry for souls that come in pairs. In rural Korea, the old stories aren't stories at all. They're warnings. And Jae-seop stopped listening too late. The Chijimi Factory, a Korean horror story. A Korean horror novel. Chapter 1. The Incheon Fire and the Journey Home. The fire started in the etching room. Jae-seop was on his break, eating a triangle kimbap from the convenience store across the street, when the alarm screamed through Building C. He dropped his rice and ran, not toward the exits like the others, but toward the loading dock where his locker held everything he owned worth keeping. His father's watch, the photograph of his mother before the cancer, and the emergency fund he'd been building for 3 years, stuffed inside a sock like a peasant hiding gold from the tax collectors. The chemical smell hit him first, not burning plastic, which he'd smelled before during smaller incidents. This was different. The acrid bite of hydrochloric acid mixed with scorched fiberglass, a scent that crawled into his sinuses and nested there like something dying. "Get out!" someone shouted in the hallway. "The whole east wing is gone!" Jae-seop grabbed his locker door and yanked. Inside, the sock was still there, his father's watch, the photograph. He shoved everything into his jacket and ran. Outside, the Incheon sky had turned the color of a bruise. Flames ate through the roof of the printed circuit board manufacturing plant where he'd spent 5 years of his life. 5 years of chemical burns on his fingertips. 5 years of overtime during holidays when normal people visited their families. 5 years of saving every won toward a future that was now belching black smoke into the autumn air. "It was the etching machine," Park from Quality Control said, his face streaked with soot. "Someone left the solvent tanks open. They're saying it was electrical failure, but—" He lowered his voice. "I saw Director Kim running out before the alarm, and he was carrying his business card holder and that little traditional house model from his desk. Who grabs decorations during a fire?" Jae-seop watched Director Kim across the parking lot, speaking calmly into his phone while workers wept and cursed around him. The man's face showed nothing, no panic, no relief, no guilt, just the smooth mask of someone who had insurance. Arson. The word bloomed in Jae-seop's mind like the flames still consuming his livelihood. Deliberate destruction for profit. He'd heard rumors about the company's debts, the delayed contracts, the whispers of bankruptcy that management had dismissed as jealous competitors spreading lies. "They'll pay us our severance. The law requires it. 30 days' wages for every year of service." 3 weeks later, they received 40% of what they were owed, delivered through a lawyer's letter that explained the company's unfortunate liquidation circumstances. Director Kim, according to the news, had relocated to Vietnam to explore new business opportunities. The train to Gangwon Province left Seoul Station at 6:47 a.m. Jae-seop sat by the window, his reflection a ghost against the passing city. Beside him, Rena clutched an iced Americano from the coffee shop in the station, their last small luxury, cold and bitter in its plastic cup. "Your mother will be happy to see us," Rena said, her voice carefully neutral. "My mother will ask why we couldn't keep our jobs. She'll ask when we're giving her grandchildren. She'll remind me that my cousin in Busan makes twice what I made and owns his own apartment." Jae-seop watched the apartment buildings blur past the window. "She'll do all of this while feeding us the best food in the house, because that's what mothers do. Love and disappointment, served together like rice and soup." Rena didn't argue. They'd been together 4 years, married for 2, and she'd learned which battles weren't worth fighting. Instead, she reached over and squeezed his hand, her palm warm against his cold fingers. "It's not forever," she said. "We save money, we regroup, and we come back. Seoul isn't going anywhere." But Jae-seop wasn't watching Seoul anymore. He was watching the stations pass, the platforms where passengers waited in orderly lines, and the woman. She stood at each platform they passed, the same woman in the same traditional dress, pure white, the color of mourning, with her hair loose around her shoulders in a way no modern woman would wear it. Her face was beautiful, ageless, with the kind of bone structure that belonged in historical dramas, and her eyes followed the train, followed him. "Do you see her?" Jae-seop asked. Rena leaned across him to look. "See who?" "The woman, white dress, standing right there on the—" But the platform was behind them now, and when Jae-seop looked at the next station, the woman wasn't there. Until she was, standing in the exact same position, in the exact same dress, with her head tilted at the exact same angle. "Jae-seop," Rena's voice was gentle, worried. "There's no one there." He blinked. The woman smiled, a slow, knowing smile that showed too many teeth, and then the train was past that station too, and Jae-seop told himself it was exhaustion, stress, the aftermath of watching 5 years burn to ash. He told himself a lot of things on that train ride. They arrived at the coastal village as the sun set over the East Sea. The station, if you could call it that, was a concrete platform with a rusted sign and a single fluorescent light that buzzed and flickered. Jae-seop's uncle was supposed to meet them, but the platform was empty. No cars in the gravel lot, no people walking the narrow road that led to town. Just the sea wind, cold and salt-heavy, and the darkness that pressed in from all sides. "The streetlights are out," Rena said, hugging herself against the chill. She was right. The village sat in a bowl of hills, and from their vantage on the platform, they could see the scattered houses, the fishing boats pulled up on shore, the rice paddies terracing climbing the hillsides. But no lights, no glow of screens through windows, no porch lights welcoming late arrivals. Just darkness, thick and complete, as if the night had swallowed the village whole. Jae-seop's phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Coming to get you. Stay at station. Don't talk to anyone." The last sentence sat heavy in his chest. His mother wasn't a superstitious woman. She believed in hard work, proper nutrition, and respecting your elders. She did not believe in spirits or curses or things that lurked in the dark. So why did her message sound like a warning? "Someone's coming," Rena said. Headlights appeared on the road, bouncing over the potholes like searching eyes. The car that pulled into the lot was Jae-seop's uncle's truck, older than Jae-seop and held together by rust and stubbornness. But when the door opened, it wasn't his uncle who stepped out. It was a woman, middle-aged, elegant, wearing a fusion dress that blended traditional Korean styling with modern tailoring. Her makeup was flawless, her smile was warm, and Jae-seop's entire body told him to run. "You must be the famous Jae-seop," she said. "Your uncle had car trouble. I offered to help."
She extended her hand, palm down, as if she expected him to kiss it. "I'm Hyun-sun. I run the dried seafood factory up the coast." She glanced at Rena, then back at Jae-seop. "I hear you're looking for work." The job offer hadn't left Seoul yet. His mother didn't even know they were unemployed. But Hyun-sun smiled like she knew everything, and the darkness pressed closer, and somewhere in the hills something howled, high and long and hungry. "Let me give you a ride," Hyun-sun said. "We have so much to discuss."
Chapter 2. The Recruitment. The car smelled like flowers, not fresh flowers, but the kind arranged on altars for the dead. Chrysanthemums and white lilies, their sweetness heavy and funereal. Jae-seop sat in the back with Rena, watching Hyun-sun's perfect profile as she navigated the dark road. "The factory processes dried squid and beef jerky," Hyun-sun said, her voice smooth as silk. "Traditional methods, small batches, sold to premium markets in Seoul and Busan. We need workers who understand quality, workers who aren't afraid of hard labor." She glanced at the rear-view mirror, and Jae-seop saw her eyes catch the moonlight, a flash of gold that had to be imagination. Workers who need to disappear for a while. Disappear? Rena's grip tightened on Jae-seop's arm. "From the city, I mean. From the stress, the competition, the endless scramble for survival. Out here, life is simpler. We work, we eat, we rest. The government even subsidizes rural employment through the new community movement. Your wages would be supplemented, your meals provided, your housing arranged." Hyun-sun smiled at the road ahead. "You'd be saving money without spending any. In a year, you could return to Seoul with enough for a deposit on an apartment. 2 years, and you might own it outright." It was too good. Jae-seop knew it was too good. But the numbers in his head, the debt from the wedding, the loans he'd taken for his father's funeral, the rent on the tiny studio they'd had to abandon in Seoul, those numbers made even impossible offers look reasonable. "What's the catch?" he asked. "La!" The sound was musical, perfect, like something recorded in a studio and played back for maximum effect. "No catch, just hard work in an isolated location. The factory is past the coastal road, where the buses don't run. We provide shuttle service morning and evening. You'd live in the dormitory, on site, at least until you found village accommodation." She slowed the car as they approached a crossroads. "Your mother's house is that direction. The factory is this way. Which would you like to see first?" "My mother," Jae-seop said. At the same moment, Rena said, "The factory." They looked at each other. Rena's eyes held something Jae-seop rarely saw there. Fear, yes, but also determination. "We need this," her expression said. "We need something." "Perhaps both," Hyun-sun said. "I'll drive you home tonight, and tomorrow you can visit the facility, see the operation, meet the workers." She turned the car toward his mother's house. "Fair warning, though, once you're inside the fence, you may not want to leave. Some of our workers have been there for decades. They say the mountains keep them young." A dog appeared in the headlights, a stray, thin and mangy, standing in the middle of the road. Hyun-sun braked smoothly, but instead of running, the dog stood its ground. Its hackles rose, its lips pulled back from yellowed teeth, and it began to whine, high, keening sounds that scraped at Jae-seop's eardrums like fingernails on slate. "Silly thing," Hyun-sun said. She tapped the horn, but the dog wouldn't move. It was staring at the car. No, at Hyun-sun, with the kind of terror animals usually reserved for predators. Finally, she pulled around it, the car's tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. Through the back window, Jae-seop watched the dog turn to follow them with its eyes, still whining, still trembling. Animals out here are half wild, no proper owners, no training. They forget what humans are. She checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, patting at her forehead, though her skin was dry and flawless, not a drop of sweat, even with the car's heater running at full blast. "Do you have siblings, Jae-seop?" The question caught him off guard. "Twin brothers, Dong-seop and Min-seop. They're in high school." "Twins," Hyun-sun's smile widened, just slightly, just enough that Jae-seop noticed the movement more than the result. "How fortunate. There's something special about twins, don't you think? Double the soul, double the potential. In the old days, villages considered them blessed, or cursed, depending on the village. The supernatural world has always had opinions about twins." "We're not superstitious," Rena said, her voice sharper than usual. "Of course not. Neither am I." Hyun-sun pulled up in front of a small house, Jae-seop's childhood home, unchanged in the decades since he'd left. "Here we are. Get some rest, eat your mother's food, and tomorrow I'll send someone to bring you to the factory. Shall we say 9 o'clock? They got out of the car. The night air was clean and cold, smelling of the sea and the pine forests that climbed the hills behind the village. Normal smells, safe smells. But when Jae-seop turned to thank Hyun-sun, he saw her hands on the steering wheel, her perfectly manicured nails, her jade rings catching the porch light, her soft palms and rough-worn cuticles that didn't match someone who ran an office and signed contracts. Her cuticles were torn. Fresh scabs lined the edges of her nails, as if she'd been digging in dirt, in rocks, in graves. "Sleep well. Tomorrow your new life begins." The red car pulled away, its taillights disappearing around the curve. The dog's howl rose from somewhere in the darkness, joined by others, until the hills echoed with the sound of animals crying out against something they could sense but not escape. Jae-seop's mother opened the door, her face pale in the yellow porch light. "You talked to her?" she said. It wasn't a question. "The woman from the factory?" "She offered us jobs." His mother grabbed his arm, her grip stronger than he remembered. "You will not take them. You will not go near that place. Do you understand me?" "Mom." "She asks about twins." His mother's eyes were wild, darting to the road where the red car had vanished. "She always asks about twins, and the twins she asks about, they disappear. Jun-gi, who worked at the convenience store, his twin brother went first, then Jun-gi. The police said they drowned, but the fishermen found—" She stopped herself, swallowing hard. "You will not take those jobs." But Jae-seop was thinking about the numbers again, the debt, the loans, the future that had burned to ash in Incheon. And somewhere in the hills, under the bloated yellow moon, a fox screamed its hunger at the sky. Chapter 3. The Factory and the Electric Fence. They went anyway. Not because Jae-seop didn't believe his mother. He did, in the way children believe their parents' warnings about hot stoves and busy streets. But belief didn't pay debts. Belief didn't give Rena the stability she deserved. Belief didn't prove to anyone that he could provide for a family, that leaving Seoul wasn't surrender, that he wasn't the failure his father had predicted he'd become. The man who picked them up drove a small white truck that smelled of dried fish and cigarette smoke. He introduced himself as the factory manager, a middle-aged man named Gwan, with a burn scar crawling up the left side of his neck like a pink vine. He wore slippers inside the truck cab, which struck Jae-seop as oddly domestic, and spoke in honorifics so formal they felt rehearsed. "Miss Hyun-sun speaks highly of you," Gwan said, eyes on the winding coastal road. "She has an instinct for people, knows who will thrive in our environment, who won't." "What happened to the workers who didn't thrive?" Rena asked. Gwan's hands tightened on the wheel. "They went to Seoul, better opportunities. You know how it is. Young people these days, they don't appreciate rural life. They want their coffee shops and their nightclubs and their dating apps." His laugh was too quick, too loud. "Not like us, eh? We know the value of honest work." The road curved around a cliff, and the factory came into view. It sat on a peninsula jutting into the gray sea, surrounded by drying racks that stretched like ribs toward the sky.
The buildings were industrial standard concrete, stained with decades of salt spray, but the fence around them was new. Razor wire on top, motion sensors mounted at intervals, a single gate with a guard booth beside it. "That's a lot of security for dried squid," Jae-seop said. "Pesticide thieves. The adjacent farms have had problems. We also store expensive equipment, vacuum sealers, industrial refrigerators. Better safe than sorry." He pulled up to the gate and honked twice. The guard who emerged from the booth was old, ancient really, with skin like dried leather and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at. He wore a padded vest despite the mild weather, and his fingers were stained yellow from the hand-rolled tobacco cigarettes that burned perpetually between his lips. "New ones?" he asked, leaning in Gwan's window. His voice was like gravel being ground. "Miss Hyun-son's recruits." The old man, Mangil, according to the name tag on his vest, studied Jae-seop's face. No, not his face, his shadow. The guard's eyes tracked the shape cast on the truck's seat, the silhouette of head and shoulders against the window's light, as if the shadow were more real than the person casting it. "The mountain knows them now," Mangil said, and turned to open the gate. Inside, the factory was almost disappointingly normal. Workers in rubber boots and work shorts moved between drying racks, turning strips of squid and slicing beef into thin sheets for curing. The air smelled of salt and the particular sweetness of fermenting protein, not unpleasant, but strong enough to coat the tongue. Industrial fans hummed from the ceiling. A radio played trot music, the bouncy Korean folk songs that grandmothers loved. Hyun-son met them in the main processing room, wearing a white lab coat over her fusion dress. In the fluorescent lights, she looked younger than she had the night before, or perhaps it was just the makeup, flawless as ever, making her age impossible to guess. "Welcome to the coastal drying facility," she said, spreading her arms. "What you see here is the public face, the business that pays the bills, that ships products to markets across the country. Good, honest work." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "But we have special projects, too, products that require discretion." She led them through the main hall into a corridor lined with stainless steel doors. "Kimchi refrigerators," Gwan explained, "industrial-sized, temperature and humidity controlled for perfect fermentation." 3 doors, 3 refrigerators. 2 were open, showing racks of clay pots and plastic containers, the standard equipment of any serious fermentation operation. The 3rd was closed, locked with a heavy padlock, and covered with paper talismans, the kind shamans sold for protection against spirits, Buddhist symbols printed in red and black. But the talismans were upside down. Every single one. The characters that should have faced heaven were pointing to earth, the protective symbols inverted into something that looked less like a blessing and more like a trap. "What's in that one?" Jae-seop asked. Hyun-son's smile didn't waver. "Specialty products, very delicate. We can't risk contamination." She turned away. "Come, let me show you the dormitories. You'll be quite comfortable here." But as they followed her down the corridor, Jae-seop caught a smell from behind that locked door. Not fermented vegetables, not aging soybean paste, something older, thicker, the smell of rot that had been working for a long time, underneath a chemical sweetness that couldn't quite hide it. He'd smelled something like it once before at his father's funeral, when they'd opened the casket one last time for family viewing. The smell of meat beginning to turn. The dormitory was a long building beside the main factory, divided into small rooms barely bigger than closets. Each held a sleeping mat, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the drying racks. Jae-seop and Rina were given adjacent rooms, although the walls were thin enough that they could hear each other breathe. "We start at 6 tomorrow," Gwan told them. "Breakfast at 5:30 in the mess hall. Miss Hyun-son is very particular about punctuality." He paused at the door. "A word of advice, don't wander at night. The motion sensors trigger alarms, and Mangil, he doesn't like being disturbed. "What does Mangil do here?" Rena asked, "besides guard the gate?" "He knows the mountain spirits," Guan said it, simply, factually, as if discussing the weather. "The village used to hold rituals, ceremonies for good fishing, safe harvests, protection from storms. Mangil was the one who performed them. Now Guan trailed off, looking at the window as if expecting to see something in the darkness beyond. "He performs other services." After he left, Rena came to Jae-seop's room. They sat together on the thin sleeping mat, listening to the wind off the sea and the distant sounds of the factory's night shift. "We should leave," Rena said, "tomorrow. Make an excuse, get our things, never come back." "We haven't even been paid yet." "I don't care about the money." "You will, when the landlords come, when the loan sharks call." Jae-seop took her hand. "1 month. We work 1 month, take what we've earned, and go. My mother's fears are just, she's been out here too long. Rural people get strange ideas." Rena didn't answer. She was looking at the window, where the reflection showed their room, their sleeping mat, their silhouettes, and a third figure standing in the corner. Jae-seop spun around. The corner was empty, but when he looked back at the window, the reflection showed 3 people, himself, Rena, and a woman with 9 shadows streaming behind her like tails, her face exactly where Hyun-sun's should have been. Then the light in the corridor flickered, and the reflection was normal again. 1 month, Rena whispered, not a day longer. In the locked refrigerator, something thumped against the door, a slow, rhythmic pounding, like a heartbeat, like something waiting to be fed.
Chapter 4. Jun-gi's Fate. The body rose with the tide. It was Jae-seop's 3rd week at the factory when they found it, or rather, when the sea gave it back. The clam diggers were out on the mudflats at low tide, raking through the gray muck for shellfish, when Old Woman Park stepped on something that wasn't a rock. Jae-seop heard the screaming from the drying racks. By the time he reached the shore, a crowd had gathered. Workers, villagers, even Mangil, who stood apart from the others with his hand-rolled cigarette burning to ash between his fingers. The body was male, or had been. Bloating and sea creatures had done their work, but the height and build were still recognizable. So was the jacket, dark blue with the factory's logo stitched on the breast pocket. "Jun-gi," someone whispered. "That's Jun-gi." The name meant nothing to Jae-seop, but it rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in water. Workers turned to each other, their faces pale. An older woman began to cry, and Hyun-sun, who had appeared from nowhere in her white lab coat, stood at the edge of the water with an expression that was almost satisfied. Such a tragedy. He was stealing dried seafood from the storage building, must have fallen into the reservoir while trying to escape. "The reservoir is inland," someone muttered. "The body's covered in salt water." Hyun-sun turned, and the muttering stopped. The tides can be unpredictable. Perhaps he washed out through the drainage channels. These things happen in isolated areas. She smiled at the crowd. "The police will investigate, of course, but we all know Jun-gi had problems. Gambling debts, drinking, a history of poor decisions." Her eyes found Jae-seop in the crowd. "Let this be a lesson. The factory provides for those who are loyal. Those who are not," Jae-seop gestured at the body, "the sea takes what it's owed." The police came that afternoon, a single young officer from the local station, barely older than Jae-seop's twin brothers. He took notes, photographed the body, and seemed to shrink smaller every time Hyun-sun mentioned her connections in Gangneung. By the time he left, his notebook was closed, and his official report would list the death as accidental drowning. But Jae-seop had seen the body up close. He'd seen the scratch marks on the torso, long parallel gouges that could have been rocks or debris, but looked more like claws. Large claws, curved like sickles, driven deep enough to scrape bone. And when the medical examiner came to collect the remains, she'd said something strange, something that lodged in Jae-seop's brain and wouldn't leave. "Interesting," she'd murmured, probing the abdominal cavity. "He's missing his liver, completely. No trauma path, no surgical precision, just gone." That night, the flies came. Jae-seop was walking back to the dormitory when he saw them, thousands, maybe more, swarming over the spot where Jun-gi's body had lain. They moved in strange patterns, clustering and dispersing, their collective buzz building into something that almost sounded like language. He stopped to watch, morbid curiosity overpowering his exhaustion. The flies swirled upward, caught a current of wind, and for just a moment, just a single, impossible moment, they formed a shape. A fox, nine-tailed, its body made of writhing black specks, its eyes two empty spaces where no flies gathered. It hung in the air for 3 heartbeats, looking at Jae-seop with a hunger that transcended physical form. Then the wind shifted, and the flies dispersed, and Jae-seop was standing alone on the path, with his heart trying to break through his ribs. "You saw it," Gwan's voice came from behind him, quiet, resigned. "The sign. It means she's chosen another." Jae-seop spun around. The manager stood in the shadow of the drying racks, his burn scar livid in the dim light. What was that thing? A warning, or a welcome, depending on your perspective. Gwan pulled out a small object, a ring, silver, with a simple band and no ornamentation. "Wear this. Don't take it off even to sleep, especially to sleep." "Why?" "Silver burns them, the old ones, the shapeshifters, the things that eat human flesh to stay young." Gwan pressed the ring into Jae-seop's palm. "You have twins in your family. I heard you telling the new girl in processing. Brothers, high school age. What does that have to do with—" "She asks about twins." Gwan's voice dropped to a whisper. "She's always asking about twins. Jun-gi had a twin brother. The brother disappeared first, then Jun-gi. Now she's asking about yours." He gripped Jae-seop's shoulder. "Whatever you do, don't bring them here. Don't tell her where they go to school, where they sleep, what routes they take. Don't give her anything." "Give her anything for what?" But Gwan was already walking away, his slippers slapping against the concrete, his shadow stretching long in the factory security lights. Jae-seop put on the ring. It was cold against his finger, colder than metal should be in the autumn air. But when he touched the band to his lips, he could taste something almost like safety, almost like hope.
Chapter 5. The Overheard Ritual. The lunchbox was stainless steel, a gift from Rena for their first anniversary. It had cost more than they could afford even then, but she'd insisted, a proper lunch container for a man who worked with his hands, something that would last a lifetime. Jae-seop realized he'd forgotten it at precisely the wrong moment. Twilight, the dangerous hour between day and night, when the light turned golden and treacherous, when the workers hurried to the dormitory, and even Man-gil retreated to his booth with extra talismans hanging from the door. "I'll be quick," he told Rena. 5 minutes. "I'll come with you." "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. "Stay inside. Lock the door. I'll be right back." The factory was quiet at twilight. The day shift had ended, the night shift hadn't yet begun, and the machines sat dormant in the processing room like sleeping giants. Jae-seop found his lunchbox where he'd left it, on the shelf above his station, and was about to leave when he heard the voices. They came from the back of the building, the area workers called the Old Wing, where the original fish drying operation had been before the concrete expansion. Jae-seop should have left. Every instinct told him to grab his lunchbox and run, to forget what he'd heard, to pretend the twilight had played tricks on his ears. Instead, he followed the voices. The Old Wing was connected to the main building by a corridor that passed behind the boiler room. Steam pipes ran along the ceiling, hissing and clanking, muffling sounds but not eliminating them. Jae-seop crouched behind a stack of empty crates where a gap in the pipes let him see into the room beyond. Haeon-san stood at the center, still wearing her white lab coat. Around her, 5 figures in traditional robes knelt in a circle, their faces hidden by white cloth masks. Candles burned at precise intervals, their flames unnaturally still in the drafty space. And in the middle of the circle, on a low table that might have been an altar, sat 2 objects, a bronze bowl filled with dark liquid, and a photograph. A photograph of 2 boys, identical twins, teenage, grinning at the camera in their school uniforms. Jae-seop's brothers. "The harvest moon rises in 3 nights," Haeon-san said. Her voice was different now, older, deeper, resonating in frequencies that made Jae-seop's teeth ache. "The soul transfer ceremony must be complete by midnight. The 1,000-year cycle cannot wait." "The workers grow suspicious," one of the masked figures said. "The man from Seoul asks too many questions." "Let him ask. By the time the moon sets, he and his wife will be meat for the racks. But first," Haeon-san picked up the photograph, and her smile was nothing human. "First, we need the twins, their liver, their blood, double the soul energy, double the harvest. With them, I complete my 100th year of consumption. With them, I become permanent human, immortal, unstoppable." The ceremony site. Here, the shrine beneath the factory, the one the villagers have forgotten, where my original form sleeps in the earth. Haeon-san's face began to shift, her features stretching, her skin rippling, her eyes turned the color of old gold. For just a moment, Jae-seop saw something beneath the beautiful facade. A muzzle, long and sharp, with teeth made for tearing flesh. 9 shadows spread behind her, moving independently of any light source. Then her phone rang, and the illusion snapped back into place. Haeon-san was herself again, middle-aged, elegant, human. "Yes?" she answered. "Yes, the tasting event. The family is invited. The elder brother's wife, too. Friday evening, full moon. We'll make it a celebration." She hung up, and Jae-seop realized she was looking directly at the gap in the pipes, directly at him. "Manager Gwon," she said, still smiling, "our guest from Seoul seems to have dropped his lunchbox. Would you escort him back to his room and make sure he understands the importance of discretion?" Gwon materialized beside Jae-seop, his hand gripping Jae-seop's arm with surprising strength, pulling him up from behind the crates. "Walk," Gwon whispered. "Don't run. Don't scream. Just walk." They made it to the dormitory corridor before Gwon spoke again. "You heard everything." "She's going to kill my brothers." "Yes." "She's some kind of—" Jae-seop couldn't say the word. It belonged to children's stories, to horror movies, to anything but the factory where he processed dried squid for minimum wage. 9-tailed fox, Gwon said. 1,000 years old, maybe older. She eats livers to stay young, to stay beautiful, to stay alive. Each liver extends her life by a decade. But twins are special. Their souls are doubled. 2 livers from twins count as 50 each, accelerating the cycle. With your brothers, she completes 100 years of consumption. She becomes permanently human, immortal, unstoppable.
And you work for her? Guan's laugh was bitter. I work against her, have been for 5 years, ever since she killed my twin sister. He pulled up his sleeve, revealing not just the burn scar, but a pattern of smaller marks, old wounds, deliberate, forming symbols that Jae-seop half recognized from temple visits as a child. I'm waiting for the 1,000-year cycle. When the moon is right, she's vulnerable. When the ritual begins, she can be killed. How? Fire, silver, the weight of the old world crushing the new. Guan pressed something in Jae-seop's hand, a lighter, silver-colored, with a logo from the 1988 Seoul Olympics. The fire must start in the shrine beneath the factory. The building must collapse on her when she's in her true form, and someone has to be willing to burn with her. Jae-seop's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with numb fingers, expecting Rina, expecting his mother, expecting anything but what he saw. The call was from his brother's number, but when he answered, the voices on the other end were wrong, speaking in archaic phrases, using grammar that hadn't been common for centuries, describing a lady with 9 shadows who visited them in their dreams. "Brother," Dong-seop's voice said, sleep-blurred and strange. "The pretty woman says we should come to the factory. She says you miss us. She says we'll live forever." The line went dead, and in the locked refrigerator, something began to pound on the door.
Chapter 6. The School Camping Trip. The elementary school had 32 students. It sat on a hill overlooking the village, a cluster of aging buildings surrounded by a fence that served more to keep the deer out than the children in. The teachers were underpaid, the facilities were outdated, and every year the enrollment numbers dropped as young families moved to Seoul. But the annual camping trip continued, as it had for 50 years. Every autumn, before the harvest moon, the children hiked into the mountains to a campsite near a mineral spring, where they learned survival skills and traditional games and the old stories that grandparents used to tell before television made them obsolete. This year, the children had no idea they were being hunted. Jae-seop learned about the camping trip from Nol-bu, one of the factory workers. Nol-bu was in his early 20s, quiet and hard-working, with a twin brother named Nol-e, who taught physical education at the elementary school. "He takes them every year," Nol-bu said during their lunch break. "Teaches them to make fires, to navigate by stars, to play the paper flipping game. The kids love him." "When did they leave?" "This morning." "Why?" Jae-seop had spent 2 days piecing together the pattern. Jun-gi and his brother, Guan's sister, others going back decades, all of them twins or siblings of twins. Hyun-seon didn't just target her victims randomly. She tracked their families, their schedules, their vulnerabilities. And now, with the harvest moon 2 days away, she needed to secure her sacrifices. "The factory shuttle, what time does it run?" "Same as the school bus. 8:30 morning, 4:30 afternoon." Nol-bu's face went pale. "Why are you asking about the school bus?" "Your brother is at the campsite with those children, and I think," Jae-seop lowered his voice, "I think something is coming for them tonight." They reached the campsite at dusk. The mineral spring bubbled up through a natural basin of rocks, surrounded by pine trees and the remnants of old campfires. The children had set up tents in a semicircle, and the smell of roasting meat drifted from a fire pit where teachers supervised dinner preparations. Nol-e met them at the trailhead, his face confused but trusting. "Brother, what are you doing here?" "We need to get the children out, now. Tonight," Nol-bu said. "What? The campout isn't over until—" "Listen to me," Jae-seop stepped forward, feeling the silver ring cold against his finger.
There are things in these mountains that shouldn't exist, things that want to hurt these children, and if we don't move them to the village, to somewhere with walls and lights and other people, they won't survive the night." Noel-E looked between them, his expression shifting from confusion to fear to grim determination. The principal, she'll know what to do. The principal was a woman in her 60s, stooped and gray-haired, who moved through the campsite with the quiet authority of someone who had seen everything. When Jae-seop told her about the factory, about Hyun-seon, about the twin brothers and the approaching moon, she didn't argue. She didn't dismiss him as crazy. She nodded once and began to gather the teachers. "I've been expecting this," she said, pulling talismans from her bag, real ones, properly oriented, covered in symbols that made Jae-seop's eyes water. The nine-tailed fox. She woke up when the factory was built. The construction disturbed the shrine beneath the earth. We've been preparing ever since. "You're a shaman." "I'm a principal who remembers the old ways." She pressed a talisman into his hand. "The children have pure yang energy, innocent, untouched by adult corruption. The fox spirits won't be able to see them clearly, but you, the workers, the teachers, we're targets, so we fight." They came with the dark. The first sign was the children's game tiles, paper squares folded for the flipping game, scattered across the clearing where the students had been playing. As the sun set, the tiles began to move on their own, sliding across the dirt, arranging themselves into a shape. 9 tails, a pointed snout, eyes made of gaps where the paper wouldn't stay. Then the fog rolled in, and the fox spirits appeared. They looked like beautiful women, dressed in white, with hair that flowed in a wind that touched nothing else. Their feet not quite touching the ground, their joints bending at angles that made Jae-seop's stomach turn. But the children couldn't see them. The principal was right. Pure yang energy, innocent souls, somehow rendered invisible to the creatures that hunted them. The children huddled in their tents, confused by the adults' panic, but obedient when told to stay inside. They didn't see the fox spirits circling the camp. They didn't hear the whispers, sweet and poisonous, promising eternal beauty to anyone who stepped beyond the salt lines. Salt. The teachers had brought bags of it, spreading it in circles around the tents, around the fire pit, around the mineral spring. The fox spirits hissed when they approached the lines, their beautiful faces twisting into something animal. "Drums!" the principal shouted. She pulled a traditional drum from her pack, the same kind used in shaman rituals, stretched animal hide over a wooden frame. The first beat echoed through the mountains, deep and resonant. The fox spirits recoiled. Other teachers took up the rhythm, using pots, rocks, anything that made noise. Gongs crashed, makeshift instruments clanged. The sound built into a wall of protection, pushing the spirits back towards the tree line. But they didn't leave. They circled. They waited. And when Jae-seop looked at the largest of them, the one with the most beautiful face and the most shadows trailing behind her, he saw Hyun-seon's eyes looking back at him. "You can't protect them forever. The moon rises tomorrow, and when it does, I will come for what is mine." The fox spirits dissolved into mist. The fog retreated. The children slept undisturbed, while the adults watched the tree line till dawn. But one tent was empty in the morning, Noel-E's tent, where he'd been standing guard, and on the ground where he'd stood, there was only a red fox print pressed deep into the mud.
Chapter 7. Gwon's Revelation. The abandoned train station stood at the end of a coastal line that hadn't run in 30 years. Salt had eaten the rails, weeds had claimed the platform, and the only remnant of human presence was the station building itself, a small structure with a collapsed roof and walls covered in fading graffiti. Jae-seop arrived at midnight, as Gwon had instructed. The note had been slipped under his dormitory door, written in archaic characters that he'd had to ask his mother to translate. "Come alone. Bring the lighter. Tell no one." Gwon was waiting inside, sitting on a fallen beam with his hands folded in his lap. In the moonlight through the broken roof, his burn scar looked almost beautiful, a pattern of old pain that had healed into something like a map. "My sister was named Mija," Gwon said without preamble. "Gwon Mija. We were twins, born during the IMF crisis when our father lost his fishing boat and our mother sold her jewelry to buy rice. We grew up poor, but we had each other. We had the village. We had hope." He pulled something from his pocket, a small bronze mirror, ancient and tarnished, with a handle shaped like a nine-tailed fox. "This belonged to Hyun-son. My sister stole it before she died. It shows the truth, the real form of things that hide behind human masks." He held it toward Jae-seop. "Look." Jae-seop took the mirror. When he angled it toward Gwon's reflection, he saw not a man, not entirely. The reflection showed Gwon's face, yes, but with pointed ears rising through his hair, and something else behind him. Not 9 shadows, 5. 5 tails spreading from his lower back like a peacock's display, each one the color of burnt amber. "I'm the same as her, a fox spirit, younger, only 500 years, and weaker, but the same kind of creature." His voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "When I was young, I ate livers like she does. I killed villagers. I consumed their souls to extend my life. I did it for 300 years before I met Mija." "You're a monster!" "I was a monster. Mija changed me." Gwon's reflection smiled, a human smile, despite the inhuman form. "She found me after a hunt, wounded and hungry. Instead of running, she brought me food, regular food, rice and fish and kimchi. She sat with me while I healed. She talked to me like I was a person." "How did she die?" "Hyun-son." The name came out like a curse. "She sensed that I'd changed, that I'd stopped eating human flesh, that I'd become weak. She came to the village to eliminate the competition and found Mija instead, a twin, unprotected, with a soul bright enough to light the underworld." Gwon's hands clenched. "I was too far away to stop it. By the time I returned, my sister was in the refrigerator, and Hyun-son was already wearing her face for the ritual." "The locked freezer?" "Contains the remains of everyone she's consumed since the factory opened. Jars of livers preserved in rice wine. Enough souls to keep her young for centuries." Gwon stood, and in the moonlight his shadow showed 5 tails swishing. "Tomorrow is the harvest moon. The 1,000-year cycle reaches its peak. For 1 hour, from midnight to 1, Hyun-son will be vulnerable, tied to her true form, unable to disguise herself, unable to escape. If we destroy the shrine beneath the factory during that hour, if we collapse the building on top of her while she's in the middle of the soul transfer ceremony, she dies permanently." "And you?" Gwon was silent for a long moment. "I'm the same species. The building has to collapse on both of us." He looked at Jae-seop with eyes that were almost human.
I've been waiting for 5 years for this, pretending to serve her, watching her take more twins, more livers, more souls. Tomorrow it ends, but I need your help. What do I do? The fire must start from below, from the shrine itself. You have the Olympic lighter. Inside it is silver mixed with the fuel, blessed by a monk who knew what he was doing. When the flames touch the shrine, they'll burn green, the color of trapped souls being released. The fire will spread to the main building. The workers will escape if they run fast enough. But you, my voice caught, you have to stay until the roof begins to collapse. You have to make sure she can't run. That's a death sentence. Maybe, maybe not. The souls in those jars, my sisters included, they'll be released when the fire burns. They might help you, push you toward the exit, shield you from the flames. Guan pressed the bronze mirror into Jae-seop's hands. Or they might be too angry to do anything but scream. I'm not going to lie to you. This could kill you. It probably will. Jae-seop thought about Rina, sleeping in the dormitory, trusting him to come back. He thought about his mother, who had warned him not to take this job. He thought about his twin brothers, who didn't know that a monster had already visited their dreams. My brothers, he said. She invited them to the factory, the tasting event. They think it's a celebration. Then we have to move fast. Guan pulled a bundle from under the fallen beam. Cooking oil, traditional perilla, in glass bottles. Pour this on every wooden surface in the building. Focus on Hyun-sun's office. Her vanity is there. Cosmetics made from human fat, 100 years old. When those burn, the fire will spread faster than water can stop it. Jae-seop took the bottles. They were heavy in his arms, smelling of earth and pressed seeds, and something deeper, something that might have been hope. One more thing, Guan said. The guard, Mon-gil, he's not what he appears. I know. He serves Hyun-sun. No, he is Hyun-sun, her original form, sleeping in human disguise. When the ritual begins, both bodies will merge, the beautiful woman and the ancient fox, becoming one creature with all the power of both. If you see Mon-gil transform, run. Nothing you have will stop him. But the fire! The fire stops the shrine, stops the ritual, stops her immortality. Mon-gil's true form is something else, something older. Guan's shadow shrank, his tails retracting into nothing, his reflection becoming human again. Tomorrow night, midnight, we end this. He walked into the darkness, leaving Jae-seop alone with the mirror and the oil and the terrible knowledge of what he'd agreed to do.
Chapter 8. The full moon approaches. The village prepared for war, disguised as celebration. In every kitchen, women gathered around wooden tables, rolling rice flour and sugar into the crescent-shaped cakes, traditional for the harvest festival. Jae-seop's mother worked alongside her neighbors, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. But every third cake, she pressed something into the center before folding the dough. Iron nails, rusted and old, taken from the collapsed barn at the edge of the village, from the beams that had stood for 200 years. Iron burns them, she explained when Jae-seop found her that morning. The old stories say they can't stand the touch of it. Any spirit that bites into these cakes will know we haven't forgotten. You believe me now? His mother's hands paused over the dough. I've always believed. I just hoped. She shook her head. I hoped if I pretended hard enough, the monsters would pretend too, would leave my children alone.
Outside, the men of the village gathered in the community center, sharpening farming tools on whetstones. The sound of metal on stone filled the air. Hoes and sickles and the long-handled rakes used for rice paddies, all of them being ground to edges never intended for harvest. The village headman moved among them, distributing strips of white cloth. "Tie these to your arms," he said, "so we know friend from enemy in the dark." Jae-seop's twin brothers arrived at noon. They came on the bus from the city, carrying backpacks full of snacks and portable phone chargers, dressed in the expensive street fashion that Jae-seop could never have afforded at their age. Dong-seop and Min-seop, 18 years old, identical in feature if not in personality, and completely oblivious to the danger waiting for them. "Brother!" Dong-seop threw his arms around Jae-seop in the village square. "This place is dead. No coffee shops, no PC rooms, nothing. How do you survive out here?" "You're not staying. Get back on the next bus. Go home." "What? But the factory lady invited us, said there's a tasting event, free food, a celebration for the harvest moon." Min-seop pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. "She's been texting us for a week. Really nice, really professional. She said you requested it." "I didn't request anything. She's—" He looked around at the villagers watching from windows, the men with their sharpened tools, the women hiding weapons in pastries. "She's not what she seems." "You sound like Mom," Dong-seop laughed, but his eyes were wary. "What's going on, brother? You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't, and neither should you. Listen to me." A red compact car pulled into the village square. Hyun-sun stepped out, wearing a fusion dress of traditional fabric and modern tailoring, her makeup flawless, her smile wide and welcoming. In the afternoon sunlight, she looked perfectly human, a successful businesswoman, a generous employer, a pillar of the rural community. "The famous twins!" Hyun-sun approached with arms open, as if greeting family. "I've heard so much about you from your brother, such handsome young men, such potential." Her eyes lingered on their faces, measuring, calculating. "The tasting event begins at sunset. We have traditional cakes, local delicacies, and a very special ceremony to celebrate the harvest moon. Your whole family is welcome." "We're not coming," Jae-seop said. "None of us." "Nonsense!" Hyun-sun's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes, a flash of gold there and gone. "Your brothers have already accepted, and Rena is looking forward to it. Such a lovely wife you have, so unsuspecting." The threat was clear. Rena, still at the factory, still within Hyun-sun's reach. "Fine," Jae-seop said. "We'll come, all of us." "Wonderful." Hyun-sun returned to her car. "Sunset. Don't be late." Dong-seop waited until the car was gone before speaking. "Brother, what the actual hell was that?" "That," Jae-seop said, "was a 9-tailed fox who wants to eat your livers, and if we don't kill her tonight, she's going to succeed." The twins stared at Jae-seop. "I'm not joking," Jae-seop said. "I wish I was. Come with me. I'll show you why." He took them to the shore where the clam diggers had found Jun-gi's body. The spot was marked with paper offerings now, small prayers left by workers who remembered, who knew what really happened, who didn't believe the official story about drowning. "A man died here," Jae-seop said. "His liver was missing, not cut out, just gone, like it had been extracted through magic. His twin brother died the month before. So did a woman named Mija, and her twin brother is still alive, working at the factory, planning to burn it down tonight." Min-seop's face had gone pale. "You're serious?" "Completely. The factory is built on an ancient shrine. The woman who runs it is over 1,000 years old. She eats human livers to stay young, and twins are her preferred targets because our souls are worth more." Jae-seop pulled out his phone. "Want proof? Take a selfie with me, then look at the photos from the tasting invitation." They took the selfie, 3 brothers, forcing smiles, standing on the shore where a dead man had washed up. When they checked the photos from Hyun-san's messages, the proof was undeniable. In every image, the factory had reflections in windows and polished surfaces. The workers cast shadows. The equipment gleamed with reflected light. But Hyun-san had no reflection at all. Where her image should have been, there was only empty space, a woman-shaped absence in the physical world. "Monsters," Min-sop whispered. "Actual, real monsters." "And tonight, we kill one." Jae-seop gripped his brother's shoulders. "Or she kills us. There's no third option." At the factory, Rina was decorating for the celebration. Jae-seop found her stringing paper lanterns along the drying racks, her face drawn with a tension Jae-seop recognized. She knew something was wrong, had known since the body washed up, since the ritual she'd glimpsed through windows, since the nights when footsteps echoed outside her door and stopped just before she could see who was walking. "She made me do this," Rina said, gesturing to the decorations. "Said it was for the harvest festival, but look at the altar." In the center of the processing room, workers had constructed a low platform covered in white cloth. Bronze bowls sat at each corner. Candles waited to be lit. And at the head of the platform, positioned like a headboard, a frame large enough to restrain a human body. 2 frames. "Those are for the twins," Jae-seop said. "I figured." Rina's voice was steady, but her hands shook. "The locked refrigerator. They opened it while you were in the village. I saw inside." "What did you see?" "Jars. Hundreds of jars, floor to ceiling, each one containing something dark, floating in clear liquid. And the liquid," she swallowed hard, "it smelled like rice wine, but what was inside the jars, those weren't pickled vegetables. Livers, preserved in alcohol, the souls of everyone she's ever consumed." Rina nodded once. "Tonight, we burn them. Tonight, we burn everything." The worker named Nobu was missing. Jae-seop searched the dormitory, the processing rooms, the drying racks, but Nobu had vanished sometime between morning and afternoon. His belongings were still in his room, his workstation abandoned mid-task. Only his phone remained, and when he found it, his blood turned to ice. The phone was inside the refrigerator, sitting on a shelf between jars of preserved organs, screen cracked, displaying a single unfinished text message. "They took Noli. They're taking me next. Help!" The refrigerator door was still plastered with inverted talismans, but now Jae-seop understood what they meant. Not protection from evil, but a trap for souls. Everything that died inside those walls stayed inside those walls, forever. "Sunset in 2 hours, Gwon said, appearing at Jae-seop's shoulder. "Do you have the oil?" "Hidden in the boiler room." "The lighter?" Jae-seop touched his pocket, feeling the cold metal of the silver-colored lighter with the Olympic logo. "Ready." "Then we wait." Gwon looked at the altar, at the restraining frames, at the candles waiting to be lit. "When the moon rises, she'll begin the ceremony. She'll bring your brothers to the altar. She'll cut their wrists and collect their blood. At midnight, when the moon is directly overhead, she'll consume their livers and become immortal. Unless we stop her. Unless we stop her." Gwon's reflection rippled in the refrigerator door. Human, then something else, then human again. "Remember, when Mangil transforms, run. The fire will do the rest." The sun touched the horizon, and something in the hills above the factory began to howl.
Chapter 9. The Factory Inferno. The villagers came at moonrise. They approached from all directions, farmers with sharpened hoes, fishermen with gaff hooks, grandmothers with cast-iron pans that had survived 3 wars. They carried drums and gongs, the traditional instruments of exorcism, and they formed a circle around the factory fence that hadn't been breached in living memory. The rhythm started slow, a single drum beating like a heart. Then others joined, gongs crashing on the offbeats, until the night throbbed with sound that pushed against the darkness.
"They can't come inside," Guan said, watching from the processing room window. "The fence is warded, but they can keep the lesser spirits out, the minions Hyun-san has created over the centuries. She'll have to face us with only her own power." Jae-seop nodded, gripping the bottles of perilla oil. Rena stood beside him, holding a bucket of fermented soybean paste, old medicine against the supernatural, meant to seal doors and mark boundaries. The twins waited by the back exit, armed with kitchen knives that wouldn't stop a fox spirit, but might slow one down. In the center of the room, Hyun-san lit the altar candles. "You've invited the whole village," she said, not turning around. "How festive, how futile." She straightened, and in the candlelight her shadow stretched wrong, too long with too many moving parts. "Do you know what 1,000-year cycle means, Jae-seop? It means I've survived empires, I've watched kingdoms fall, I've eaten the livers of warriors and priests and kings. Do you really think some factory workers and farmers can destroy me?" "We're going to try." "Of course you are. That's why I chose you." Hyun-sun turned, and her face was beginning to shift, the bones moving under the skin, the jaw extending, the eyes turning pure gold. "I needed someone with twins in their family, someone desperate enough to take a suspicious job, someone who would bring their loved ones within reach." She gestured, and the door slammed open. Workers dragged Dong-seop and Min-seop, bound and gagged, their eyes wild with terror. They were thrown onto the altar, their arms stretched to the restraining frames, their wrists exposed. "I was going to make this ceremonial, elegant, traditional, but you've forced my hand, so we'll do this the efficient way." She produced a curved knife, ancient, bronze, inscribed with characters that made Jae-seop's eyes water. The blade caught the candlelight as she approached the altar. "Now," Jae-seop said. He threw the first bottle of oil. It shattered against Hyun-san's vanity, the antique desk where she kept her cosmetics, the creams and powders made from substances Jae-seop didn't want to think about. The oil spread across the wood, soaking into fabrics, dripping down to pool on the floor. Rena ran for the doors, smearing soybean paste on every frame she passed, sealing exits, creating barriers that lesser spirits couldn't cross. The twins struggled against their bonds, while Jae-seop hurled bottle after bottle, coating the walls, the altar, everything. "You think fire will stop me?" Hyun-san laughed, but she was backing away from the spreading oil, her transformation accelerating. Her beautiful human face was nearly gone now, replaced by something vulpine and ancient, with a muzzle full of needle teeth and eyes that glowed like dying suns. "I was born in fire. I've walked through flames for a millennium. I am not the only monster here," Guan said. He stepped out of the shadows, and his human disguise fell away like a shed skin. Guan's true form was smaller than Hyun-san's, younger, he'd said, only 500 years, but no less terrifying. 5 tails spread behind him like a burning fan, each one the color of autumn leaves. His face had extended into a pointed snout, his fingers had curved into claws, and his eyes held something Hyun-san's didn't. Humanity, just a flicker, buried deep, but enough. "I've been waiting for this 1,000-year," Guan said, "waiting to repay what you took from me." "The twin lover." Hyun-san's laugh was a howl now, reverberating through the factory. "You think your pathetic 5 tails can match my 9? You're a child playing at righteousness. I've forgotten more about power than you'll ever." The guard booth door exploded outward. Man-gil emerged, or what had been Man-gil, the ancient keeper who watched shadows instead of faces. His padded vest ripped apart as his body expanded, tripling in size, sprouting fur and tails and terrible intelligence. 9 shadows spread from his back, merging with Yeon-sun's, and for one horrible moment, Jae-seop understood. They were the same creature. The woman was a disguise, a mask. Man-gil was the original, the 1,000-year-old fox spirit in its true form, with Yeon-sun as merely an extension, a puppet, a walking appetite. The two forms rushed towards each other and merged, and the thing that resulted was nightmare given flesh. "Run!" Guan screamed and launched himself at the merged creature. Fox struck fox in a blur of tails and teeth and claws. They crashed through the altar, scattering candles, overturning bronze bowls. Blood spattered, Guan's blood, dark and smoking, but he didn't stop. He drove the creature back, away from the twins, away from the spreading oil. Jae-seop ran for his brothers. The restraints were leather, old but strong. His knife sawed through the first strap, while Min-seop struggled, freeing Dong-seop's left hand. Behind them, the battle raged, Guan's 5 tails against the creature's 9, 2 monsters tearing each other apart in a factory made for processing death. "The lighter!" Rena shouted. "Use the lighter!" Jae-seop freed the last strap and shoved his brothers toward the back exit. Then he pulled out the Olympic lighter, felt the cold silver casing against his palm, and flicked the wheel. The flame caught. He touched it to the oil. The fire that erupted wasn't orange or yellow. It burned green, the color of trapped souls being released, of centuries of consumption going up in supernatural smoke. The flames spread faster than natural fire, racing along oil trails, climbing walls, consuming everything in their path. And the flames spoke. "Thank you," whispered a voice that might have been Jun-gi. "Thank you," echoed another that carried the cadence of Mi-ja, Guan's dead twin sister. A chorus of the consumed, dozens, maybe hundreds, their gratitude and their rage mingling in the fire's roar. Guan looked at Jae-seop through the flames, his 5-tailed form beginning to burn. "Get out, now! Come with us!" "I can't. I'm the same as her. The fire knows." Guan smiled, and for just a moment his face was human again, just a man who loved his sister, who had chosen good after centuries of evil, who was finally going home. He drove forward, tackling the merged creature with all his remaining strength. They crashed through the floor, through the concrete, through the foundation, into the shrine beneath, the ancient place where the fox spirit had first been born. Jae-seop ran. The building was collapsing around him, green flames eating the support beams, the traditional roof tiles, blessed by centuries of weather and prayer, crashing down with impossible weight. Spirits swirled in the smoke, pushing him forward, shielding him from falling debris, 100 victims giving their last strength to ensure one man escaped. He burst through the back door as the factory caved in. The roof fell first, heavy tiles crushing the shrine, sealing the foxes beneath. Then the walls, then the floor, then everything that had made the coastal drying facility a place of death and consumption. Fire shot from the wreckage like a geyser, green and gold and white, carrying something that might have been screams up into the night sky. Rena caught Jae-seop as he collapsed. The twins? Safe, outside the fence. She held him, both of them watching the factory burn. Is it over? Behind them, the sea had turned the color of blood, not metaphorically, the actual water reflecting something that had no natural source, staining the waves crimson for miles. The fox's death was affecting the world that had hosted it, nature itself mourning or celebrating the end of something ancient. The drums continued until dawn, the villagers maintaining their rhythm even as the fire died and the ruins smoked. They didn't stop until the sun rose and the blood-red sea returned to gray, until the last of the green flames sputtered out and the terrible howling from the hills finally fell silent.
Chapter 10. Aftermath and Return to Seoul. The police ruled it a gas explosion. They came 2 days after the fire, when the ruins had cooled enough to walk through. They photographed the wreckage, interviewed the workers, and filled out forms with the careful handwriting of men who knew better than to write the truth. The jars in the refrigerator were catalogued as preserved cow livers for food production. The altar was listed as traditional festival decorations destroyed. The bodies found in the basement, twisted, merged, unidentifiable as either human or animal, were never mentioned in any report. Connections in the city, the young officer explained, his voice carefully neutral. They've decided this was an industrial accident. Insurance will pay out. New jobs will be found. No one will speak of what happened here. And if we do? Jae-seop asked. The officer looked at him for a long moment. Don't. They found Nol-bu on the 3rd day. He was in a storage room beneath the processing floor, a space that shouldn't have existed, accessed through a trapdoor hidden under industrial shelving. The trapdoor had been sealed with talismans, proper ones this time, and when the villagers finally broke through, they found Nol-bu curled in a corner, alive but silent. He didn't speak for a week. When he finally did, his first words were, "I heard them screaming, all of them, everyone she'd ever eaten. They screamed when the fire came, but at the end," he shuddered, "at the end, they were laughing." His twin brother Nol-i was never found. The village held a memorial anyway, burning paper money and offerings at the shore where the clam diggers still refused to work. Gwon survived. No one knew how. The villagers found him crawling from the ruins at dawn, his human form restored, his body covered in burns that healed too fast from natural flesh. He couldn't walk for 3 days, and when he could, he packed a single bag and headed for the bus station. "Where will you go?" Jae-seop asked, finding him at the platform. "South. There's an island where things like me can live in peace, away from humans, away from temptation, away from everything I was." Gwon's face was scarred now, the burns leaving patterns that almost looked intentional. "The villagers know what I am. They've been tolerant, but tolerance doesn't last forever. Better I leave before their kindness turns to fear." "You saved us. You saved everyone." "I killed a lot of people before I learned to be saved." Gwon's smile was tired but real. "Maybe this makes up for some of it, maybe not. Either way, I can't stay." He held out his hand, human now, 5-fingered, with only faint scars where claws had been. "Thank you for trusting me." Jae-seop shook it. "Thank you for choosing us." The bus came, and Gwon got on, and Jae-seop never saw him again. The wedding was small and practical. They stood in the city hall office, Jae-seop in his one good suit, and Rina in a dress borrowed from his mother, and signed the papers that made them legally married. The original ceremony, church, guests, a reception they couldn't afford, had been planned for a future that no longer seemed important. They were alive. They were together. Everything else was details. "To new beginnings," Rina said, raising a paper cup of instant coffee from the vending machine outside the registrar's office. "To survival," Jae-seop replied, tapping his cup against hers. They moved to Gwangmyeong, a satellite city 40 minutes from Seoul by subway. The apartment was tiny, one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, but it was theirs. Jae-seop found work at a logistics center, loading and unloading trucks,
earning less than he had at the electronics factory, but sleeping better than he had in years. At night, when the city noise died down and the neighbors' televisions went silent, Rena would sometimes ask, "Do you dream about it?" Sometimes, he would admit, the green fire, the screaming, Guan's face at the end. "Do you think it's really over?" And Jae-seop would hold her close and say nothing, because he didn't know. The world was full of old things, hidden things, creatures that wore human faces and ate human flesh, and had been doing so since before history began. Killing one didn't mean killing them all. But he hoped that had to be enough. The fur appeared 3 months later. Jae-seop was hanging up his work jacket when he found it, a single strand of golden hair caught in the zipper, glinting in the apartment's fluorescent light. Fox fur, the exact color of Hyun-seon's eyes when they had begun to change. He stared at it for a long moment, feeling his heart rate climb. Then he pulled out the Olympic lighter, still silver, still blessed, still carrying traces of the fire that had burned 1,000-year evil, and touched the flame to the fur. It burned blue light and vanished, leaving no ash. "Seoul should be safe," he said to the empty room. "Should be." He walked to the window, looking down at the street below. The neon signs of the city blinked in their eternal rhythm. Subway trains rumbled in the distance. Somewhere, a siren wailed. And in the alley across from their building, a red compact car was parked, the same model Hyun-seon had driven, the same color, even the slight dent in the rear bumper. A woman stood beside it, looking up at his window. She wore a modern dress that blended traditional elements with contemporary fashion, the kind of fusion style that Hyun-seon had favored. Her makeup was flawless, her smile was wide and warm, and when she waved, Jae-seop saw that her fingernails were too long, too curved, and stained with something that might have been dirt, or might have been blood. The 1,000-year fox could create avatars, he remembered. Hyun-seon was just one. The original form had died in the fire, crushed beneath the blessed weight of ancient tiles. But what about the others? The faces she'd worn before Hyun-seon, the personalities she'd created and discarded over 10 centuries of hunting. Jae-seop closed the curtain. The lighter was still warm in his hand. And outside, in the city that never truly slept, the woman in the red car continued to smile, patient, hungry, and very, very old.